Picture this. It is March of 2021. Warner Bros. Is about to drop a 4-hour superhero film on a streaming service, not in theaters, not as an extended cut on a Blu-ray, a fully refinished, re-edited, rescored mega movie that cost an extra $70 to $100 million, just to redo a film they already released 4 years earlier. The cast? Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, Ray Fisher, Ezra Miller, a blockbuster ensemble that had already headlined one of the most expensive superhero movies ever made. The original Justice League in 2017 cost around $300 million to produce before marketing. It was supposed to be DC's answer to the Avengers. Instead, it became a punchline, a messy hybrid of Zack Snyder's dark operatic style and Joss Whedon's quippy reshoots. Critics dragged it. Fans mocked the CGI mustache. The box office stalled at around $658 million worldwide, which is not what you want when you are trying to launch the biggest superhero team in history. By all logic, that should have been it. Movie released, movie underperforms, the studio moves on. Who would look at that and say, you know what we should do? Spend another $70 to $100 million rebuilding the same movie for a smaller audience on a streaming service? Warner Bros. Did, but they did not do it for Justice League. They did it for Zack, or more accurately, for the people who worship Zack. Because by the time Zack Snyder's Justice League hits HBO Max, his fans have spent almost 4 years turning him from a director into a cause. They put up billboards in Times Square. They buy plain banners. They organize trending hashtags every single year on the movie's release anniversary. They raise more than $500,000 for suicide prevention in his name. They photoshoot him as Jesus. Literally, Zack in a crown of thorns, Zack cradling Superman like a Renaissance painting. And the studio caves. It is the first time in Hollywood history that a major studio completely redoes a film because fans simply would not shut up. No matter what you think about Snyder's work, that is power. That is what worship looks like. So how did a director with a mixed critical record and several underperforming blockbusters end up treated like a pop culture messiah? To answer that, we have to rewind almost 2 decades to a movie about zombies in a shopping mall. Fast forward back to 2004. Zack Snyder is not Zack yet. He is a commercials guy, music videos.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
And those are some clips. It was hard to put anything together that was coherent because we just finished shooting about a week and a half ago.
It's a very effective preview of coming attractions. How long will it be before we see the feature?
Not too long, actually. We hope to have it finished by late March, early.
Strong visuals, no studio feature directing credit. Universal Pictures hands him the keys to a remake of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. On paper, it looks like sacrilege. Cult horror classic, first-time director, fast zombies. What could possibly go wrong? And then it works. Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is mean, tight, and kinetic. Not a masterpiece, but a calling card. The action is clear, the camera moves are aggressive, and the visual style is already very Zack Snyder. Stylized violence, bold color, slow motion used less like a gimmick and more like punctuation. Hollywood notices. But the real jump happens 2 years later, 2006, 300. Budget, about $65 million. Worldwide box office, roughly $456 million. That is a massive hit. And more importantly, it is a meme factory before we even called things memes. This is Sparta, the rain of arrows, the freeze frame, speed-ramped battle moves that make every frame look like a graphic novel panel. Snyder adapts Frank Miller's comic with almost religious fidelity to the visuals. Fans respond. For a generation of teenagers at the time, this is their cinematic equivalent of metal album art come to life. 300 is where Zack Snyder stops being that guy who remade Dawn of the Dead and starts becoming a brand. Stylized, hyper-masculine, mythic. Not realistic, but operatic. And that brand gets tested again with Watchmen in 2009. The film divides critics. Some call it slavishly faithful to the panels and emotionally distant. Others praise its ambition and visuals. The fans, though...
This is where we hold them! This is where we fight! This is where they die! On these shields, boys! Remember this day, men, for it will be...
Many of them just appreciate that someone took their weird, unadaptable graphic novel seriously, even if it is messy. This is Snyder's first brush with a pattern that will follow him for the next 15 years. Critics cool, fans hot. The stronger his visual signature, the more he locks in a core audience that does not care what Rotten Tomatoes says. That core audience will eventually become the Snyder cult. But we are not there yet. Jump to 2013. Man of Steel. Warner Bros. Wants what Marvel has. A cinematic universe, a recurring Superman, a darker, more grounded tone. They give Snyder their most iconic hero, and a budget that ends up around $225 to $258 million. Man of Steel flies to around $670.1 million worldwide. Financially, that is a win. Critically, it is complicated. Some see it as the first truly modern Superman, alien, lonely, dealing with the weight of his power. Others see wholesale character assassination, neck snapping, city leveling, a Superman who seems more burdened than inspiring. But for a lot of viewers, this is the first time they see Superman treated like a god. And that word matters, because from here on out, Snyder does not just direct superheroes, he directs gods. His Krypton is a mythic dying world. His Jesus references are not subtle. Young Clark with a cape, framed like a messiah. Adult Clark floating in space, arms spread wide. The music swells like a church choir. If you are the kind of audience member that wants superheroes to feel like modern mythology, Snyder is now your high priest. Warner Bros. Leans into this tone with Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice in 2016. The film brings in Ben Affleck's older, brutal Batman Wonder Woman and hints at the rest of the future Justice League. It also costs a small fortune and ends up making around $873 million worldwide. On paper, that sounds huge, but expectations were closer to $1 billion or more. Combined with a brutal critical reception and a toxic cinema score, the studio starts to worry that Snyder's dark, operatic, deity-level heroes might be turning off general audiences. Behind the scenes, DC Films' leadership changes. Jeff Johns and John Berg get more power. Executives start talking about making things lighter and more fun. And then tragedy hits. During the production of Justice League, Snyder's daughter Autumn dies by suicide. He leaves the film to be with his family. Officially, Warner Bros. Brings in Joss Whedon to complete the movie, punch up the humor, do some reshoots.
Today, Joss Whedon is doing extensive reshoots on the Justice League. Now, everybody's going up in arms, and I'm kind of getting sick of it because, of course, they're doing extensive reshoots. Zack Snyder had a personal tragedy, and he had to take over the movie. Well, if he's going to take over the movie, he's got new ideas. Of course, with the success of Wonder Woman, they didn't have as much planned for Wonder Woman in the Justice League.
Unofficially, they basically rebuild it. Whedon reportedly rewrites about 80 pages, shoots extensive new scenes, and orders a hard cap on the runtime at about 2 hours. That is an interesting constraint when your movie was originally designed as a 4-hour mythic epic split into 2 parts. Justice League finally releases in November of 2017. Critics call it Frankenstein's monster. Fans notice the reshot scenes, the color grading changes, Henry Cavill's digitally erased mustache, and in the shadows of Reddit threads, comment sections, and Twitter, before it rebrands as X, you start to see a phrase, "There is another cut, the Snyder cut." At first, it is just a rumor, a rejected assembly cut, unfinished VFX. Maybe it exists, maybe it is fan fiction. But Snyder himself starts to quietly fan the flames. He posts storyboards on Vero. He hints at scenes you never saw. A black suit Superman, a different ending. Darkseid actually showing up. He likes posts about a Snyder cut. He never outright says, this exists in releasable form, but he never shuts the conversation down either. Enter the fans. Over the next 4 years, the Snyder cult is born in real time, and calling it a cult is not just internet snark. That is the label media outlets use. Headlines talk about Snyder stans and the Snyder cult as if they are describing a pop culture religion. You have fans referring to him simply as Zack, as if he is their close friend. You have fan art of Snyder crucified, Snyder as a robed messiah, Snyder ascending above the Warner Bros. Logo. The Jesus imagery is not a metaphor. It is literal. They buy billboards in Times Square saying, "Release the Snyder Cut." They fund a plane banner over the Warner Brothers lot, and anything else that keeps his name in the conversation. And here is the twist. They tie it all to charity. Using the Snyder Cut campaign as a rallying point, fans raise more than $500,000 for suicide prevention charities, especially the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in honor of Zack's daughter, Autumn. This is important because now the campaign is not just, "We want our version of the movie," it is, "We are doing good in the world for Zack because of Zack." That is how religions work: devotion, community, charity. Of course, there is also a darker side. Rolling Stone reporters later find that at least around 13% of the Arjo release, the Snyder Cut accounts, were bots or fake profiles. For context, that is more than double the usual 3 to 5% bot activity around a typical big hashtag campaign. So, you have millions of real fans, plus a noticeable boost from artificial amplification. But the core thing is, it does not stop. For 4 straight years, they keep going. Most online campaigns burn out after a month, maybe a year. Snyder's army just restarts the clock every few weeks with new tags, new artwork, new YouTube breakdowns of every obscure Vero post. It does not take long for executives to realize something crucial. This fandom, while polarizing, is undeniably engaged. Engagement is the magic streaming era word. These people will watch anything with his name on it, twice. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Is in flux. Leadership changes again. The DC universe is wobbling. Projects are announced and then quietly canceled. And sitting in the vault is this theoretical Snyder Cut everyone keeps yelling about. Eventually, the math changes. HBO Max launches. They need subscribers. They need content that gets attention. Zack Snyder's Justice League becomes less of a nuisance and more of a potential marketing event. In 2020, they greenlight it. Reports estimate an extra $70 to $100 million for finishing VFX, new scoring, and even reshoots. Remember the "We Live in a Society" Joker trailer line? That exists purely because they were doing new material. For a movie that already flopped by franchise standards, that is an insane level of investment. You don't see Disney paying Rian Johnson to reshoot The Last Jedi because fans made a hashtag.
Announcement that Zack Snyder's original version of Justice League will finally see the light of day, coming in 2021 exclusively to the HBO Max streaming service. This is just insane, thinking back to 2017 when the theatrical cut of Justice League hit theaters and we were all excited, only to leave the theaters disappointed that Zack Snyder's original vision for the film seemed to just get buried under unfortunate behind the scenes of.
You don't see Paramount giving Michael Bay a $100 million director's cut to fix Transformers, but Snyder gets it. When Zack Snyder's Justice League finally releases in March 2021, it lands like a pop culture correction. Critics are still mixed, but open-minded. Rotten Tomatoes, critic scores land in the low 70s versus the original theatrical version's 30-something%. Some call it bloated and self-indulgent. Others argue that, yes, it is 4 hours long, but at least it feels like a cohesive singular vision. Fans, predictably, love it. Many of them declare the theatrical cut non-canon. They retroactively label the 2017 film Justice League. Snyder's 4-hour cut is the real Justice League, part of a separate continuity they call the Snyderverse. This is another religion move, an alternate canon, a parallel mythology. In the Snyderverse, events happen differently. Characters have different arcs. The studio's official continuity is just one branch of the timeline. The true faith is the other one. Snyder leans into this from his side. He talks publicly about his sequels, his full 5-film arc from Man of Steel through 2 more Justice League films. He reveals storyboards of an evil Superman, a nightmare future, a dark side war on Earth. So, where do you go after you have literally willed a cut of a movie into existence? You go to Netflix. While Warner Bros. Is cooling on Zack, new leadership, new direction, and eventually James Gunn's rebooted DC universe, Netflix sees an opportunity. Big vision director, built-in fan army, reputation for spectacle. Streaming needs events. They hand him Army of the Dead in 2021. It is a heist meets zombie apocalypse film that fits his style perfectly. Slow motion, saturation, stylized violence, a mythic Las Vegas overrun with undead. It reportedly becomes one of Netflix's top 10 most watched originals, with around 75 million households checking it out in the first month. Not bad for an R-rated zombie movie. Naturally, plans explode outward. A prequel. An animated spin-off series called Army of the Dead, Lost Vegas, a sequel called Planet of the Dead. Snyder has talked about how interconnected his zombie universe could become. At the same time, he is developing an even more ambitious project, Rebel Moon. Rebel Moon starts life, depending on which version you hear, as either a pitch for a Star Wars movie or at least a Star Wars adjacent space opera. When that does not pan out with Lucasfilm, it evolves into Snyder's own sci-fi mythology under his Stone Quarry banner, with Netflix footing the bill. 2 films, shared budget estimated around $166 million for production, a full marketing push. PG-13 cuts for the widest audience, plus R-rated director's cuts for the hardcore. This is Snyder with near total creative freedom and a studio that wants not just a movie, but a franchise. Part 1, A Child of Fire arrives in December 2023. Part 2, The Scargiver follows in April 2024. Critics are not kind. Reviews land in the mixed to negative space with recurring complaints. Paper-thin characters, derivative plotting, messy structure, the usual anti-Snyder talking points. But the numbers, at least the streaming numbers, look solid initially. Netflix touts big completion figures and high watch hours. And among Snyder's fans, the response is familiar. They gravitate to the director's cuts, arguing that the R-rated versions are the real films, criticizing the PG-13 theatrical cuts as compromised. Again, we see the pattern. There is always a purer version, a truer vision. If you did not like it, you just did not see the right cut. Maybe this movie showcases Snyder's biggest pitfall and biggest strength at the same time. He is always building mythologies, but they often feel like they skip past the part where you fall in love with the characters before worshiping them as gods. Behind the scenes, Netflix is doing its own math. Army of the Dead did numbers. Rebel Moon gets eyeballs. But these are not cheap shows of confidence. $160+ million budgets, global marketing, and then the kicker. What is the ongoing value? Because Netflix is not in the theatrical event business. It is in the retention business. Does a Snyder universe keep people subscribed for years or just give them a big weekend? By 2024 and 2025, you start to see the correction. Despite Rebel Moon's reported streaming success, Netflix quietly pulls back. The animated Army of the Dead, Lost Vegas, canceled. The planned Planet of the Dead sequel, not moving forward. An LAPD SWAT movie Snyder was developing with them, scrapped. Even Twilight of the Gods, Snyder's Norse mythology animated series that lands around a 76% Rotten Tomatoes critic score and roughly 63 out of 100 on Metacritic, gets canceled after 1 season. This is the corporate paradox in full view. On one hand, you have a director whose name reliably trends, whose fans mobilize like a political campaign, who has proven he can pull at least decent numbers for giant genre swings. On the other hand, you have budgets ballooning, franchises stalling, and a streaming economy that is now asking, what is the long-tail value here? Meanwhile, back at DC, James Gunn launches his own Superman in 2025. Gunn's film ends up overtaking Man of Steel domestically with more than $292.4 million in the United States and Canada, while worldwide grosses float in the roughly $606 to $620 million range. Globally, Man of Steel still edges it out, but the comparison is constant. Every number for Gunn's Superman is measured against Snyder's. Every still image of the cape gets stacked next to Henry Cavill's moody flying shots. This is Snyder's legacy, whether you like it or not. He is the baseline. He is the measuring stick for modern cinematic Superman, Batman, and the tone of DC movies, and his fans are not quietly moving on. You still see our restore the Snyderverse trend whenever a new DC project stumbles. You still see people insisting that the real DC universe is the Snyder timeline, and everything else is an alternate reality. Some of the more extreme fans post images of decapitated heads of executives like Jeff Johns, Walter Hamada, and Toby Emmerich, rendered as villains who killed the Snyderverse. That is not just fandom, that is us versus them, heresy versus truth behavior. You also see his followers organizing around awards. At the Oscars, Snyder's work ends up winning non-traditional fan-voted honors like Oscar cheer moment and fan favorite for sequences like The Flash's speed scene and Army of the Dead. Later reporting from Rolling Stone suggests bot activity may have helped boost those votes as well. Again, you might say, well, who cares? They are fan categories, not actual Academy Awards. But the point is, there is a coordinated impulse to elevate Snyder beyond director we like to artist who deserves recognition from the establishment. And if they won't give it to him, we will hack the system. So where does that leave us? On one side, you have a director whose filmography is a patchwork of incredible imagery, polarizing stories, strong box office peaks like 300 and Man of Steel, and expensive swings that did not fully land. Critics point to bloat, muddled themes, and a tendency to mistake stylization for depth. On the other side, you have one of the most committed, organized, and frankly intense fan communities in modern film history. People who spent real money on billboards and plane banners. People who spent years of their lives in online campaigns. People who mixed advocacy for suicide prevention with a push for a 4-hour superhero movie. People who literally redrew the canon of a major studio franchise to preserve their preferred version. If you strip away the comic book branding and the hashtags, what you are looking at is a modern case study in worship. A charismatic figure with a clear aesthetic. A story of suffering and injustice. Both personal tragedy and corporate meddling, a narrative of a true vision, suppressed by a corrupt institution, a community of believers who see themselves as protectors of the faith, charity work done in his name, sacred texts and images, the storyboards, the director's cuts, the black and white editions, alternate canons, and endless debates over what is and is not real. Hollywood has had beloved directors before, Spielberg fans, Tarantino diehards, Nolan devotees, but none of them have a movement that forced a studio to spend up to $100 million fixing a movie. None of them have 4-year sustained campaigns with both bots and deeply committed real people. None of them are regularly photoshopped as Jesus by their audience. So, is Zack Snyder really Hollywood's most worshipped director? If you define worship as universal acclaim, then obviously not. Plenty of critics still roll their eyes at his name. Plenty of casual viewers are indifferent, but if you define worship the way religions work, devotion, sacrifice, community, ritual, and a willingness to fight outsiders, then yes, no other modern director has a fan base this mobilized, this mythologizing, and this willing to live in an alternate reality where their preferred version of events is the only one that counts. The irony is that the industry keeps treating Snyder like both a risk and a lifeline. Studios bring him in when they need spectacle and a brand, then get cold feet when the budgets swell and the narratives fracture. Fans cheer every time he gets a sandbox. Executives quietly cancel half the toys when the quarterly numbers do not justify them. Maybe that is the real pattern. Snyder builds worlds designed for worship, gods, rebels, mythic warriors locked in slow-motion combat. His most loyal fans project that same worship back onto him. The corporate side tries to monetize that energy without fully understanding it, then recoils when it gets out of hand. And everyone else? We are just watching a director who, for better and worse, turned his own career into a cinematic universe, with disciples, apocryphal cuts, and endless debate over what his true vision really was. Whether that universe keeps expanding or finally contracts, one thing is pretty clear. In a town full of directors chasing audiences, Zack Snyder is the rare case of an audience chasing their director, relentlessly, faithfully, and sometimes fanatically.